How many of you play TCGs, or trading card games? Magic? Pokemon? That new Digimon TCG? Something else? I, don't. I loved Pokemon back when it was new, and opening booster packs for me is like a drug. Despite getting like 14 Magneton cards as the holos back in the day, the rare time where a Venusaur or something would appear was insanely addictive. My friends and I didn't even really know how to play Pokemon though. Sure, after a few months I got one of the first basic starter decks/sets. It wasn't the one with Machamp as the holo, it was something else. But it came with a playmat, damage tokens, a rulebook, etc. Before that point, my friends and I would just kind of pick our Pokemon and then battle it out as if we were playing the Game Boy games with cards. So whoever had the stronger card in terms of raw stats basically always won. We didn't concern ourselves with finding energies, so much as we just didn't allow the other person to play a card they didn't physically own the energies for. After I got this starter set though, we still kinda just picked our Pokemon and then battled it out without any rules. We tried playing by the rules a few times, but even though the Pokemon TCG is kind of designed as a watered down Magic the Gathering for kids, it was still too much work for us to play right as kids. We had no idea how to construct a deck that even functioned, let alone could compete. If you were missing even just one basic Pokemon or a middle evolution, you couldn't play your favorite powerful cards, and having to do things like discard energies felt like torture with our terrible decks. It was just no fun to brick constantly like that, and to have to shelve our favorite third evolutions, let alone fill most of our deck with stuff like energies. So once the Pokemon TCG fell off as the biggest thing in the world, and you could no longer find booster packs in every single store in the US, I just sort of stopped caring. I still have what few cards didn't get stolen by other kids, and I still really like them, but I have no interest in the modern cards, what with all of their crazy evolution variants, insane stats, and chaotic visual designs. I tried Magic about a decade and a half later, when one of the digital card games was free for Games with Gold on Xbox 360. I enjoyed that to some extent as well, particularly because, since it was digital, I really had no choice but to play by the rules, and the game itself did all the work for me so I could concentrate on strategy and enjoying the game. That being said, I still didn't know how to build a good deck, so it didn't stick to me thanks to the challenge, and the fact that other games I'd have rather been playing were also coming to gold, like Sleeping Dogs. Through all of this, all of it, I hated Yu-Gi-Oh! I hated that some of the kids thought it was better than the Pokemon TCG, when I just saw it as a simplified knockoff that used monsters with stupid names and ugly designs. I hated that its rising popularity killed Pokemon back then, meaning the already waning popularity of Pokemon in my rural little area was further buried. I played like half of a game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Once as a tween, because a friend wanted me to try it at the park across the street. He was adamant that I'd think it was cool. I didn't. I couldn't. Yu-Gi-Oh! Was the enemy, and the anime was stupid too while I was at it. About the only positive experience I let myself have with Yu-Gi-Oh! Throughout the years was with the Rugrats All Grown Up episode, where the parody card game, You Gotta Go, was sweeping the school and Chucky got obsessed with it. I liked the parody, and I liked that it was targeting Yu-Gi-Oh! Instead of Pokemon. Fast forward to 2022. Even at the beginning of the year, I didn't really harbor any ill will toward Yu-Gi-Oh! Anymore, because I just didn't care. But I also still saw it as this overly simplistic, garish card game with a cheesy, shallow anime attached to it, and some of the dumbest card names and monster designs I've ever seen. It didn't bother me, but as someone who cares about art and design, Yu-Gi-Oh! Often came across as a series that created cards by using a random word generator on Google. Ultimate Baseball Kid, Outstanding Dog Marin, Dr. Cranium, Morphotronic Cellphone, Worm Ugly, XX-Saber Ragigura, Performapal Odd Eyes Unicorn, Dinkle, the Maiden of Raspberry Goo Island. Okay, so I made that last one up. Anyway, sometimes these cards were clearly supposed to be goofy or punny, like the card Totally Awesome. Other times it felt like they were utter chaos though, crystallized into card form. Still, it didn't affect me at all, so why lose sleep over it? I'd barely thought about anything Yu-Gi-Oh! For a decade at least. Then, in February, I noticed a free-to-play game that had released a few weeks before on the PlayStation Store, Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. I'd never really found interest in the previous Yu-Gi-Oh! Video games, obviously, especially after seeing a friend play one once and realizing that it apparently didn't even follow the real rules of the TCG. Why even try it if it wasn't gonna represent the card game? Especially because it's not like it can represent the anime instead, since the anime is the card game. But this was also free to play, and I didn't know whether Konami had released any other Yu-Gi-Oh! Games on PC or home console in the last decade and a half. Being a free-to-play game, I didn't expect that they'd do a bunch of weird RPG stuff or anything that would get in the way of the TCG itself. Maybe this was just the raw card game. So on a whim, I downloaded it. It took me a few days to finally start playing. I went into solo mode, saw that there was basically nothing but a couple of basic tutorial sections, and rolled my eyes. So unless you pay money, you're not going to get access to any solo content to learn the game, right? I asked myself, cynically. Why wouldn't Konami just throw new players to the wolves in online duels? The first few tutorials weren't interesting. It was all fresh to me, but I didn't particularly see the engaging part. It wasn't until the duel strategy section, where I got the Raigeki card and the Monster Reborn card, that I got the itch. The game was giving out gems like candy, allowing me to open probably around 40 booster packs right away, and like I said, I love booster packs. I then realized that the game had thousands and thousands of cards, and they all seemed to be viable in casual play in a way that didn't seem possible in modern Pokemon, let alone something like Magic's constantly rotating standard format. I thoroughly enjoyed opening those packs and reading the cards. Many of them were extremely wordy, and I didn't understand any of it. So many terms that didn't make sense to me, but it was still addicting to get a card that sounded powerful or actually looked cool. Combine that with Raigeki and Monster Reborn, which allowed me to both destroy every monster on my opponent's field and revive a monster from either player's graveyard, respectively, and I suddenly felt powerful as a player. I felt cunning. The possibilities for being sneaky felt endless. As I kept playing the tutorial duels, I learned about more and more of the mechanics, and the terms started to actually make sense to me. I really had to pay close attention to the wording of some cards, and often made mistakes because I had misinterpreted them. But after doing that a few times, I would look back at it closely, realize the problem, and instantly level up my understanding of the game as a whole. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a complicated game in a lot of ways. It's a really deep game in a lot of ways too, and somehow Master Duel provided just enough of a safe space for new players to learn in, while also drowning me in opportunities to gather new cards, that it felt wonderful to learn, especially once I started learning about the comboing potential with smart deck setups. I'm not good at Yu-Gi-Oh! I know a lot more about it now, and have also been watching hours and hours of content on both it and Magic from creators like Tolarian Community College and Team APS. I've learned a lot, but I also still don't care about things like the meta. There's little that's fun to me about looking up pre-perfected decks and then dominating with those. I like doing the strategizing myself, not just following instructions. I know my deck, which is a Blue Eyes deck because Blue Eyes was the card everyone drooled over back in the day, is technically not very good at high-level play. I also know that it's got some holes in its design. I don't brick starting hands as often as I used to, but it can still happen on occasion, and anyone using tons of negates can easily trash me, though I'm working on dealing with that. But at the same time, I also don't care. Do I enjoy coming up against the 15th deck that takes 30 actions in one turn and then negates every single thing I try once it's my turn? No. But boy do I love playing with my friends. Friends who have followed the game loosely for the last decade. Or friends who have played some Magic but have never tried Yu-Gi-Oh! Friends who also just want to have fun with it. I appreciate that Master Duel has a lot of solo content for exploring different deck archetypes. I love looking through the list of cards, hoping to find that one new thing I missed that will transform my deck. I love finding that person to face that has a new strategy I haven't come across before. I love finally being able to one-turn kill, or OTK, someone, or coming back to win a game that looks completely lost. I love the feeling of seeing a weakness in my deck and patching it up by adding or removing a card or two. I also love the speed of the game. Similar to Pokemon, the thing that I struggled with the most in Magic was the resource system and how slow that could make the game. A lot more of your turns and time in these games is spent building up to prepare to actually play the game, while lightly poking at your opponent in the meantime. A lot more of your cards in your deck don't have overt value, but rather have value only in how they allow you to use other cards. I don't really enjoy that. Yes, there are downsides to the idea of being able to build up a wall of death in a single turn in Yu-Gi-Oh!, but it also means the game is fast, and tides can turn really quickly if you're paying attention. When your deck is competitive against your opponent, every turn can be interesting to play, and every choice can be engaging for more than just how it affects you a turn later or whatever. That's not to say there's anything wrong with the way Magic or Pokemon do things, it's just really not my preference. As I've continued to learn, I've of course realized that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has a wealth of issues of its own. Some are unique to it, some are not, but as a TCG being played casually, it also feels like the one that's the easiest to get to the meat of and enjoy, and has the least amount of wasted space in terms of game pacing and design for each match. I really don't like the resource game when it's universal to every deck, and I'm glad it's not in Yu-Gi-Oh! Outside of some specific archetypes. I like that a turn can offer you multiple different avenues to go down if you're struggling, as long as your deck synergizes with itself well. It feels fantastic to take a risk and have it pay off. I consider myself a casual fan of the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG now, and I'm excited to keep up with it from time to time. I like having the alternative fan game Dawn of a New Era to theorycraft and build decks around, without free-to-play booster pack limitations. I can use whatever cards I want in my deck. But I also like having those limitations in Master Duel, to run what you brung, so to speak. It feels like it used to when you were a kid and you would open booster packs and use your real cards. You had to make a deck out of whatever cards you pulled. I like that, so far, Master Duel has continued to be incredibly fair with its gems and such, so that I can keep being a free player. Because I will not be spending money on this game, I can promise you that. So it's nice that the game hasn't grinded to a halt after probably 50 hours of play. I'm also excited to grab Legacy of the Duelist when that goes on sale, to get a more single-player centric alternative, even if the game is ugly as hell compared to Master Duel. Which, by the way, how in the world does Master Duel's music kick so much ass? It's so good, like, seriously. About the only thing I don't enjoy about Master Duel so far, and this is a pretty serious problem, is how wishy-washy the online duels against random people are. When I was in Bronze tier, I hated it, because I did like 10 duels before I found someone who didn't feel like a Smurf account pub stomper. It was OTK after OTK, and I loathed every moment. Once I got into Silver, it was suddenly magnificent though, because nearly every duel was a challenge without being overwhelming. Gold, though, started to once again put me up against really meta decks, which I just wasn't capable of facing. I don't find it fun to face the people who look up OP meta decks on YouTube and then glide through the ranks using those cheap strategies. Want to make a deck that's only about mining it to find the pieces of Exodia, or use a trap-only deck that has me hurting myself with each action I take? Cool. Want to use an interesting archetype or modified structure deck that nobody else is using? Awesome. Want to do like me and completely build a deck from scratch, not looking up any strategies as if you're 12 years old on the playground again? Fantastic. But, I'm just so not into the people who are all using the same exact deck that I know is coming from some YouTuber because I've seen the video they ripped it from. It puts a huge question mark on each duel. Am I gonna get to play this round, or am I gonna get stomped by a pleb who just exploited someone else's hard work constructing a strategy so they could make it to platinum rank? I don't know how Master Duel matchmakes. It doesn't feel like it has much going on under the hood, other than the ranking system broadly restricting who can be matched against who. I have no idea how they'd eliminate most of the trolley decks from showing up when I'm just not that good of a player, but something feels like it needs to be done. I think different formats could be useful, using the events like the early XC's event. One thought I had was having a constant but rotating matchmaking option where everyone uses the same deck, or a handful of decks with one or two evenly matched archetypes. That way you can experiment with them beyond solo mode, learn more about the game, and while that event is going on, you're on an even playing field as soon as you learn that archetype and the decks involved. Because a lot of the imbalance I'm feeling has to do with the broad scope of cards. I feel like I'm competent enough to learn a deck and compete, but not when I also have to go up against thousands of completely different types of decks at the same time. It needs a level playing field as an option. I know I really haven't said much so far in this video that isn't obvious to everyone who knows Yu-Gi-Oh! And I don't know if what I've said will be useful or interesting to people who don't play, but I also kind of just wanted to share how fun this experience has been and why. There is one other thing I wanted to do though, because this is just the type of thing I love doing. Back when I was playing Paladins constantly, I made a video where I created a couple of champions of my own, trying to figure out unique mechanics that could be interesting to play around, while also keeping them balanced. Well, I couldn't help myself. I did the same thing here, by coming up with an idea for a Yu-Gi-Oh! Archetype I wanted to share. Myself and a few artist friends then quickly sketched out and made a few rudimentary card examples. Links to their art accounts are in the description if you're interested in checking out work they take more seriously, and that's highly recommended. So, considering I'm still new to Yu-Gi-Oh!, I don't know if there's an archetype like this mechanically already, but I haven't run across one yet, so any Yu-Gi-Oh! Veterans can tell me if this sounds interesting or fun to use and or original. The archetype I came up with is called the Vegetable Swarm, or Void Swarm/Swarm for short. It's primarily made up of sentient vegetables and fruits that come from some unknown void dimension, or maybe multiple dimensions, considering glimpses inside the portals they spawn from often reveal various prismatic colors of emptiness. I wanted to do 3 things with this archetype to make it stand out. Firstly, I wanted to give it a sort of mana system that is hopefully unique to just this archetype in the form of void tokens, which are less like token monsters and more like greed tokens, spell tokens, or Xyz materials. Unlike something like Pokemon or Magic though, these resources accumulate fast enough to keep up with the pace of Yu-Gi-Oh! Secondly, while these cards can all be used with the normal deck structure rules in any deck, if you have a special Vegetable archetype card in your extra deck, unique rules are applied to the usual limitations. These include being able to have up to 5 of each level 4 or below Void Swarm monster you want in your main deck, 4 of each level 5 to 6 monster, but only 2 of each level 7 and above. It's sort of like a military hierarchy, with many low-level soldiers, a good chunk of higher-up people in charge of them, and then a handful of people at the top. Extra deck rules are normal, as are the rules related to every card that isn't specifically Void Swarm. The other thing is that if you run a Void Swarm deck with these special rules and with that Archetype card in your extra deck, you have to run a full deck of 60 cards. It's a swarm, so you have to compromise your ease of burning through the deck a bit for the sake of the extra flexibility these cards will have. I also think that no more than 20 cards can be non-Void Swarm spells, traps, and monsters. At least 40 of your cards in this 60 card deck must be Void Swarm. And thirdly, as I said earlier, one of the struggles I've had most often when dueling random people is that everyone is using vastly different decks with different archetypes. Particularly with as wordy as some of these cards can be, it's often difficult to understand what your opponent is doing until you've faced or used that archetype a decent amount of times. I'm not going to hold up the match by slowly reading every card and trying to parse out what they're doing on their turns. Often I can't even do that anyway because they're moving so fast, and cards are flying in and out of play in mere seconds. So the third thing I wanted to do with this archetype is help make the core capabilities of each card within it available at a glance. This is why every different fruit and vegetable in the swarm are both from different colored voids, have different emotions, and are different fruit and vegetable / animal hybrids. The fruit and vegetable dictates the type of monster. Bunkins are all around balanced effect monsters. Strawberries are high stat effect monsters. Pinegwins are high attack, low defense effect monsters. Coconows are high defense, low attack effect monsters. Corn snakes are pendulum cards, and synchro summons are called balanced meals, which basically combine the powers of lower tier monsters in some way, and the art reflects this by having the required synchro materials teaming up. Their emotions then suggest the tier of monster. 1 and 2 level monsters are scared, so frightened bunkin, terrified corn snake, or cautious coconowl. 3 and 4 are happy, 5 and 6 are confident, 7 and 8 are angry, and 9 through 12 all share the same emotionless moniker, implying that they're so powerful that they're like unknowable fruit and vegetable gods. The void color they're in, meanwhile, dictates the type of effects they have. Gray void doesn't offer effects. White void deals in excavating, shuffling, special summoning, and synergize particularly well with synchro summoning, while green void is focused on drawing cards, especially spells. Black void is for sending things to the graveyard, and they work well for Xyz summoning. Purple focuses on traps and things like gambling to bring themselves or other cards out of the graveyard. They're also most commonly listed as specific fusion materials. Red void is for aggressive effects like destroying opponent cards, while blue void is for protections like avoiding battle damage. Shifting void, which always have a 2-color background, are for any monster with multiple effects of different types to choose from, usually high-level monsters. The 2 colors would obviously dictate the types of effects. And finally, prismatic void monsters are specifically the highest level ones, which have a rainbow void background and can have effects of 3 or more types. Structured this way, even if you're not reading a card when you face a Void Swarm deck, you generally know its strengths, weaknesses, stat balance, monster type, and purpose. This should make it a bit easier to get into learning to play against it. These days, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Meta tends to rely heavily on negating things while burning through your deck, and special summoning the heck out of stuff, often even taking upwards of 20 or more actions in a single turn. The Void Swarm is no different in terms of the high amount of actions taken. The main idea with the Void Swarm is that as you summon the weakest of the swarm, they each carry a Void token. These Void tokens can be used on activating their effect, or they can be saved, and summoning a full field of 5 Void Swarm monsters with the same species or void color will give them bonus Void tokens each turn. Unspent Void tokens can then be carried over to any Synchro, Xyz, Tribute, Link, or Fusion summoned monsters that the previous monster was tributed toward. In fact, any time one of your monsters sends another that has tokens to the graveyard, they gain those tokens. This includes Void Swarm monsters your opponent controls too, making Void Swarm versus Void Swarm matches extra interesting and chaotic. However, unless an effect is in play that prevents this, void tokens attached to a monster will go to the graveyard or be banished with them if it's due to actions by a non-Void Swarm card. Each end phase, a single accrued Void token disappears from any Void Swarm monster that is in the graveyard or banished until they have none left. More powerful Void Swarm monsters will have higher effect activation costs, and even more effect options, making it almost like a Magic or Pokemon deck. Mid-tier monsters that are level 5 through 8 will add 3 Void tokens to their total when summoned, and level 9 through 12 monsters will add 4. Link monsters gain the amount equal to their Link rating. Once you have the monsters with the effects you want, you can use these powerful effects by spending Void tokens and synergizing the different species and Voids together. As a basic idea for an archetype, I think this seems pretty unique and engaging, not to mention super chaotic and crazy when facing another Void Swarm deck. I like that it restricts the cards to easy to understand ideas that have strict limitations, but also allows you to really push hard with specific effects if you can gather enough tokens into a single monster. It feels more restrained, but in a way that can also make cards more powerful if you invest heavily into a single tactic during a match, and it leans into the current meta design of lots of summons, sacrifices, and moves each turn in a way I haven't seen elsewhere. Would it work and be balanced? Who knows, considering none of these cards actually exist, but it sounds fun to me and captures the best of Yu-Gi-Oh's punny archetypes, I feel. As I said earlier, I'm enjoying my time with Yu-Gi-Oh!, and since I have a few friends that are longtime fans, I can easily see myself playing it casually for a long time going forward. Meanwhile, I'm glad that Master Duel exists, and I'm enjoying my time with it too. It's a surprisingly nice way to get into the game, and could be a really satisfying way to play around with decks if Konami figures out how to have more balanced matchmaking options. I look forward to what they do with it in the future, and I think it's funny that while everyone else was playing tons of crazy AAA games back in February, I was over here playing a free-to-play card game where one of the cards is literally, unironically called Worm Ugly. I'm fine with that. But what do you guys think? How many of you play Yu-Gi-Oh? How long have you played? What about other TCGs? And how long have you played your TCG of choice, if any? Also, what do you think about the Void Swarm archetype? Sound off in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.